Hello, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the second episode of Patriots Uncovered.
Woo!
Talking some free agency updates here. What's going on, Dan? How are you, man?
Happy to be talking about this. I have a very positive outlook on the free agency, which baffles me that some people don't. So I'm excited to talk about it. I'm excited to get into these guys. Yeah, I feel good.
Largely, I do too. I think it's funny because I think you and I were texting the other day. Zolak sends out that tweet on, I think it was Sunday, right?
Mhm.
Expect fireworks here in
Yeah,
Foxborough, whether it's, Monday or Tuesday. And it's about taking that with a grain of salt. But I think when you look at kind of what we've done the past couple days here, that, we'll kind of start talking through here in a minute. I like what we've done. I don't think we've kind of overcommitted to just
mhm,
spend the money just to spend the money sort of thing.
yeah,
And we've brought some adults in. So, I guess kind of without any further ado, Dan, why don't you kick us off just from an overall, like, let's just kind of talk about free agency, what the contract situation looks like for some of these guys and really how we should be thinking about some of these deals.
yeah. It's something that like I know, and I actually tweeted it out the other day too, talking about like eventually one day on Twitter, like people will realize that when uh 5-year deal for $150 million gets dropped, like that's not the real years and it's not the real value. Like that's the
Yeah.
max value that is going to be unrealized 95% of the time. I think, right, I get Twitter's right is all about the engagement, so you got to overreact, but 95% of NFL contracts are 2-year deals, and the third year is almost always the out.
Yep.
And that top number, like when we'll talk about Antonio Gibson here next,
Yep.
that 3 years, $17 million contract. If he hits that, that means he did really, really fucking awesome, and it's very unlikely he gets that 17. So
Yeah.
it's okay to relax. Almost everything's 2-year deals, and it's for way less money that gets initially reported. So people need to relax.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. I think I saw this was, I think this was up through yesterday morning, so this wouldn't have accounted for anything yesterday. But I'd seen like basically in total across the NFL about 2.5 billion in total contracts were signed across the league, right? And
Yeah,
when you look at a guaranteed money perspective, it was just over half. It was about 1.3 million.
yeah,
So we see these. I think everybody has sticker shock, right? Because
yeah,
the agent wants to put out the big number, and Schefter wants to report the big number, Rappaport wants to report the big number. But I think you're right, right? It's really looking at what's that guaranteed money look like and how much are some of these guys getting up front to really understand the financial commitment that you're putting towards one of these guys. Because I think you kind of nailed it. If Antonio Gibson goes out and earns 17.5 million, I think we're all going to be incredibly happy with Antonio
yes.
Gibson as a Patriot. So,
Yeah,
um,
no one's gonna be mad about it, right? When we
yeah,
talk about Kendrick Bourne, the same thing. $33 million. Oh, Patriots are stupid. It's like, dude, he's making $6 million a year. It's not 30 million. Like,
absolutely.
relax.
Yeah. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and we kind of start, I think one of the biggest ones that we were kind of unsure going into free agency if we were to have a chance to bring him back or not,
Mhm,
is Mike Onwenu. So bringing him back, I think it was 3 years, 57 million and
mhm.
36 and a half guaranteed. So where are you at with the Onwenu signing there, Dan?
So this was, I mean, full agreement. This was our number one guy.
Yeah.
He has to be. Our offensive line was horrific, and he was the best one, and he was one of the best ones on the market. And what I really liked looking at, right, if you kind of zoom out a little bit for all of the guards that were signed, like Landon Dickerson, right, massive deal, 4 years, 50 million guaranteed, right? Panthers paid massively for their two guards, 5 years, 44 million guaranteed. For Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, another 4 year, 26 million guaranteed. Rams, Kevin Dotson, 3 years, 32. Jonah Jackson, 34 guaranteed. So he fits in right there in the middle, which for me, I feel like is a great value. And realistically, he's probably going to be our right tackle. So he's getting pretty good right guard money to then go play right tackle. So I was
Yeah.
a huge fan of the signing. If you look at his cap hits a little bit more closely, he's actually going to be funny. Oddly enough, to start with him is funny. He's one of the real guys that 10 million or 11 million this year, 21 million, then 25. That third year, it's 15 dead. So he's actually a true 3-year deal.
Yep.
But again, he's someone that we're praying he's there for all 3 years and he earns that 57, right? That he gets those incentives. So I was a huge fan of it. And ideally he earns every cent because that means our offensive line hopefully is playing much better. But I was a huge fan of it, and especially when you compare him across the league, I thought he fit in very well for being a very good player who's young in his prime.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, I would totally agree. I think one of the things it was really nice to kind of hear the context about where
Mhm,
he kind of comes in from that average annual perspective against some of those other guards in the league. I think one of the guys that surprised me quite a bit was Robert Hunt, right? Like what the
mhm,
Panthers went out and did for a guy like him, taking him away from Miami. I thought the Rams did a nice job, not only bringing in a nice guard there, but also taking him away from Detroit, right? So that
yep,
those were two things that I like. But I think one of the nice things about Onwenu is that look, that positional flexibility, right? Like
yes,
being able to play guard and getting a good price at guard, but also being able to kick out at tackle
mhm,
is something that I mean, look, you could argue that we've actually got a bit of a deal there because of that positional flexibility that we have with him, right?
yes,
So that's one thing that I was definitely keen on. And look, there's something to be said for some stability, man. I think
mhm,
when you think about some of the age and some of like the lack of depth, I guess that you would say across the rest of the line for a guy, in Van Pelt coming in to have somebody that's been here, got some
mhm,
stability, got some relationships with, Gerard. I really like that signing. And I think that was a huge check mark for look, whoever's at quarterback. And we'll talk about a guy here in a second about that
mhm,
we brought in, but and we kind of mentioned it on that first episode too. You've got to build that line out. So whoever you bring in here has got some time. And this guy, I think you're right. He's a building block.
and right, and kind of to continue off that, right? Homegrown guy. So now, right, new staff, new GM, quote unquote, in Elliott Wolf, right? But we're paying a homegrown talent. That's huge for our locker room that they're seeing that these guys are getting rewarded, and even across the league, right? That we're not just one and done contract type deals, that we will reward the better players. And that I think that's a really good message to the guys that are currently in Foxborough and then people that we're still trying to bring in, right? Showing that, like you said, that stability piece of it, I think is huge.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly that I think that's a point that probably really needed to be hammered home because when you think about some of the things that we've done in the past, right, with Bill, it's like, look, he really was a guy that did not want to pay for past production, right?
Mhm.
So whether that player earns it, and in most cases they kind of had earned the bigger contract elsewhere, he was never really one to kind of pony up and do that.
Mhm.
I think we you kind of saw that with Logan Mankins towards the end, right? Stuff
Yeah.
like that, but obviously, a little bit of a different situation, but I think that's a good point to bring up because we talked about Gerard being able to make that first impression, right? And the guys that he brings in and kind of the vibe that they're willing to put out as a team now. And I think this is a really good first step to kind of send that message around the league saying, look, if you play well, we're willing to take care of our own guys. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
All right. So keeping on the offensive side of the ball here, a guy that came in from the Washington Commanders that has always kind of, at least from a fantasy perspective, I think everybody's been in on at some point or
Yeah.
had high hopes for at some point. But went to Memphis, drafted in the third round, coming over from the Commanders. Antonio Gibson, 3-year deal, Dan. I think it was, I think there's what, 5.5 million in guarantees, but up to 17.5 around there.
It's like 11 million base. And really
Yeah.
for him, his third year contract, it's 4.5 cap hit, but it's only 1 million dead and 3.5 in savings. So realistically, we have him for 2 years, very cheap. And I right, he's the third down back that we really need. Like as much as Zeke was good and he ended up playing more than he probably should have if Mondre didn't get hurt. He's a great pass catcher. And he has a case of the fumbleitis here and there, but again, I think if you obviously hammer it home and something that New England has been known for is you don't fumble the ball, whether that's a Bill thing or not, I think that's going to stay. I think he's the type of player that is cheap that can very easily like outperform his contract.
Yeah. I would agree. I mean, look, I think what we've seen out of Ramondre up until this point, like we've seen him, I guess you could make the argument we've seen him be able to kind of shoulder that load and be that 3 down back. But then you could also make the argument that, look, maybe he's not that guy because he's gotten banged up each of the last couple years. Right. So
You gotta protect him.
agreed. And I think to your point, bringing in somebody that, I mean, look, he played wide receiver in college. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, this guy, he can be a weapon out of the backfield. And
Mhm.
look, he's got juice, man. Like, He's an elevated guy, like over 215 pounds.
Mhm.
Um, and having that juice and those soft hands out of the backfield, you're right. The fumbles are a valid concern, but it's nice to just not have, and no disrespect to Zeke or no disrespect to say Deonta Foreman or anything like that, right? Like, which is another person who I kind of had in mind about who would they bring in somebody like
Yeah.
that. It's kind of nice to see them take a shot on somebody like this that does have juice, and
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to kind of see how that split goes, right? With in kind of Van Pelt's offense. That's something I'm definitely going to be looking forward to as training camp kind of starts to play out.
Yeah, because Mondre did show some pass catching ability, right? So, and you could say like, well, it feels a little redundant, but I do think it allows him to take more of a break, so he can be a 70% of the backfield type guy, but without getting just run into the ground
Yeah.
because he is good. So we want him to be on the field. We want him to be healthy, and giving him the CMC like 98% of the touches is just
Yeah. It's
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 unattainable for long term
yeah.
success.
Yeah, I would agree. No, I'm excited to see how they spell him because I think you're right. Like, honestly, what would be really nice is spell Ramondre a little bit more
Mhm.
inside or outside the 20s, right?
Yeah.
So in that kind of middle of the field. So you got Ramondre nice and fresh for that red zone because,
Yep.
I think he's kind of that bigger thumper back that you'd kind of want in there for that goal line work. So,
Yep. And getting
um,
just an extra pass catcher out of the backfield for the
yeah.
rookie quarterback eventually is also a nice safety valve. You got the rookies to tight ends, but rookies to running backs too with those dump offs is really
Oh,
big.
absolutely. I mean, thinking about some of the two back sets there, right? Like having each guy being able to kind
Yeah.
of curl out in the flat there. Yeah, that's a very good point as well.
Mm.
All right. So kind of let's stay on the offensive side of the ball. And let's just talk about Kendrick Bourne coming back. I think uh, eh, weirdly enough, I think this is probably the receiver outside of, let's say, Pop, that I think most people are either excited about or kind of trust the most
Yep.
from a veteran wide receiver perspective for the Patriots, which is kind of wild to say. I never thought a couple
Yeah.
years ago that I would have said, hey, we trust Kendrick Bourne the most. But
Yeah.
look, I think he's done some good things here since he's got New England. I think he's
Mhm.
got juice. And look, it seems like some of the things that he did speak kind of glowingly about Bill and how he kind of changed some work ethic and
Mhm.
everything like that. But it seems like he's a good fit in the locker room and
Yes.
somebody that I'm happy to see them come back at this price. What do you think about Kendrick Bourne?
Yeah, I thought he was fine. I know, like, the initial sticker shock was massive, and then when the contract details came out and, like, his cap hits in 25 and 26 are only 7.9 million, like, he's well beneath, like, that top tier or even he's middle tier, right, type range. So I think money-wise, it really isn't a big deal. And one, we actually physically have to spend the money and the cap and the cash and everything, so that's all fine. But yeah, he's a locker room guy. He's not a wide receiver one, right? We can't go into the season with him as our top guy. No
Sure.
offense to him, but he's a little bit older, coming off right the ACL, like can't happen. But he's a great wide receiver two, wide receiver three type guy that he just had I think I just retweeted it, working out with like Tyquan Thornton. And it's like you got to realize like some of these guys, yeah, maybe he really isn't worth even 7.9 million per year, but his value to the locker room and like getting people to buy in and work hard, that's where the money is also going. And
Yeah.
I know a lot of people will only care about the production on the field, but it's still played by humans.
Yeah.
And right, you need guys that get people bought in. That was one of the reasons that I really love Zeke. That
Yep.
you know he worked his ass off the entire season, which was not true of everyone.
Yeah.
So, getting a guy like Bourne in there, I think hopefully right now with a whole new coaching staff, he's out of the doghouse for these dumb reasons that we saw the past 2 years as well. Um, he makes big plays. So I'm
Yeah.
a big fan. I hope he comes back. Should hopefully the same, but I guess you never know at his age. But worst comes to worst, it's not fully worth it. And it's a 2-year deal, and then we cut him, and who cares?
Exactly. I think it's a good point that you brought up is that it's funny that we found ourselves saying, well, why is Kendrick Bourne in the doghouse again? He seems to be the only guy
Yeah.
that can be out there making plays for us. So I think it's a good point in saying that, look, new coaching staff, let's hope he's like, it seems like he's the type of guy where, look, they gave a nice little contract to, seems to
Mhm.
be kind of rewarding the guy that's been here a little bit. So it would
Yep.
be nice to see some of that feeling carry over with the new coaching staff, because look, I do feel like I'm in agreement with you. I feel like he's a guy that can, make some splash plays. Ideally, we see Pop take a step forward, and
Yes.
we either look, we'll talk about some of the other guys in a minute from a free agency standpoint, but I think the biggest thing is, how do we target this position in the draft as well, right? But
Yeah,
I
it's
think having somebody like Kendrick Bourne to start, like things could be worse. There's obviously work to do there.
yeah.
Um, Another offensive note. I don't know how quickly you kind of or how much you kind of want to go into this, but what are your thoughts on Austin Hooper?
You know, I mean, yeah, one year, 4 million. Who cares?
Yeah.
Honestly, the way I looked at it is obviously it's just depth because Hunter Henry.
Yep.
I like the fact that right he worked. He already has the AVP connection, right?
Exactly.
He was there. So I think right he's a depth blocking thing. He'll catch I don't know
Yep.
10 passes. Who cares? But I think his role is going to be just hey, I know this offense. Let me help you guys out learning X, Y, and Z, and just being a depth guy. I don't think it's a big move either way. But
Yep.
having some familiarity with the offense to ideally help some of the other players along, I think might be valuable.
Yeah, that's kind of where I landed on it too. And honestly, if I think about this from a fantasy perspective a little bit, I will say it feels like they're putting quite a bit of faith in Hunter Henry.
Yeah.
Like from a hey, like you're gonna be relied on as like the guy. Like, look,
Mhm.
I know the last couple of years he largely was, even with Mike Gesicki here. But Gesicki, like he ran enough routes and he took enough snaps and looks away. It
Mhm.
it really doesn't feel like it does feel like Hooper's going to be kind of an afterthought in like
Yep.
the actual offensive game plan. So I will say, in like whether it's tight end premium leagues or two tight end leagues, Hunter Henry is a name that is kind of at least on my radar on that front. But
Yeah, and it's funny because if you look at, I know like over the cap, like they do their grades, and they gave that
yeah,
grade like a D minus. They're like he's massively overpaid. Which, yeah, 10 million, 5 million, 10 million, and then his third year again, it's only 11 million cap, but only 2.5 dead, and we save 8.5
yeah,
million. So again, another 2 year deal. Yeah, it probably is an overpay for what he is, but at the same time, again, we talk all about like our wide receivers need a ton of work, right? Just the offense in general needs people to throw to. And just look at Mac's rookie year, right? Look at the connection that
yeah,
he had with Hunter Henry. Like you need a reliable player there for whether it's Brissett, who we'll talk about for half the season, and then when the rookie takes over, you need guys that are good. And he's also really good in the red zone. So yeah, huge on Hunter Henry. I think he is the tight ends. Yeah, we don't have
yeah.
anyone else there.
I think, and it's not like this draft class is particularly loaded. Like the last couple, we've had some serious kind of guys that you could get in rounds 2, 3, and 4. There's a
Yep.
couple names that as we enter draft season, we can kind of discuss there. But I mean, one of the things that I think about is, and we talked about it briefly at the start, is like, look, while it may seem like quite a bit this year,
Mhm.
the real thing is going forward here, we don't have these massive dead cap commitments in future years, right? Because I think
Yep.
whether Patriots fans want to admit it or not, no matter who we draft this year, like this is a transition year for us. So
Yes.
like I like the fact that look, we're signing some guys that may seem like they're a little bit expensive this year, but we're not committing a lot of cap down the line. And I think
Mhm.
leaving that flexibility down the line is something that I'm actually happy about with what they've done. I
Mhm.
think as we've talked through these guys so far, on one is really the commitment that we have, like for that
Mhm.
3 years, and that's a guy that we're fine with, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, and we entered with 100 million in cap space. I think we're down to like 55 million. We
yep,
also don't need to spend all of it because what we don't spend
exactly.
this year, you just carry over to next year, right?
Yep.
And again, as much as I don't think we're as far as away as maybe Boston Sports Radio likes to make it seem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like we're going to the AFC Championship game this year, barring like the most insane run ever. So it's okay to understand like you have to build the team. And that's
Yeah.
the one thing that like all of these contracts and signings like the best ever? No. Are they the splashiest? Clearly not. But they're going about it with a very clear plan, right? We're getting solid players, some good depth pieces, and we're not breaking the bank. We're not just throwing money out there, just throw it out there, right?
Yep.
Like Carolina had to pay out the ass for those guards, right?
I
They're
know.
they're paying a massive like we suck tax. You haven't seen that as much with these Patriot deals, at least in my opinion. Right. So that tells me, and like there was the report, like agents were like, oh, the Patriots are playing hardball with their contracts. I'm kind of okay with that.
Mhm.
Right. Like
Yeah.
talking about like Ridley, there was a lot of people that were pissed that like we didn't pay him $23 million, like, or a 50 million guarantee. Like I would have been like, yeah, cool, we need him and he's good, but like I would have been a little angry. That's a lot
Yeah.
of money for a 30-year-old wide receiver.
Yeah, we might as well talk about him now since he's up.
Yeah.
As far as topic of conversation, I honestly would not have been thrilled if we landed on him for kind of that amount either. Because, look, I get it. If you're drafting a rookie, which look, by all accounts, it does seem like we're going to be moving
Mhm.
towards taking a rookie here. Um, I just don't know if adding Calvin Ridley to a current receiving core of Kendrick Bourne, Pop Douglas, and Hunter Henry
Mhm.
really moves the needle to the point where, like, okay, like that's somebody that is going to go get you a drive in January or late December
Mhm.
when you're fighting for a playoff spot. Because as you talked about, like, it's still fucking murderer's row from a QB perspective in the
Yeah.
AFC East, right? Like,
It's
so
insane.
to expect a rookie to come in here and
Mhm.
not fucking run the table, but like really compete with these guys. Where even if you add Ridley in, we're at a substantially lower from a weapon standpoint. I
Yep.
was fine not committing to a guy like that. I get the argument for it, to your
Yeah.
point.
Because we have the money, so like,
Because we
sure.
yes, agreed. But at the end of the day, look, I'm kind of happy. He's 30 years old. I do think he was when you kind of look at some of the stuff that Matt Harmon put out recently,
Mhm.
as far as how his 2023 rent, I do think it was a little bit underrated, and I think it was probably made
Mhm.
out to be worse than it was by
Yep.
some on Twitter.
I'd agree there.
And so look, it'll be interesting, I guess. On the flip side of this, I kind of respect what the Titans have done, right? They're giving Will Levis every
Mhm.
chance to succeed there.
Yep.
But I also just think they had a few more pieces in place. They had some money already committed kind of on that side of the ball.
Yep.
And so all the power to him. I just don't necessarily think we're in a position to kind of do that just yet. But
Yeah, and that's the thing. I do see it. I understand, like, we do have the money, we could float it, and yes, you're setting up your rookie for the best chance to succeed right away. But again, if you're being smart with your money, I don't know if that's really that would have been the best deal that we could have made.
yeah, agreed. If it was something closer to, you know, somewhere in between that high end of where he landed and like where Gabe Davis was, I think
Mhm.
for me that would have been a lot easier to stomach. But
Yep.
um all right, so why don't we just let's kind of keep it here, right? We've been talking about the offense a little bit. And I know there's a couple guys that are still out there right now.
Yep.
Marquise Brown, Mike Williams, who was actually just released by the Los Angeles Chargers, and Tyler Boyd, right?
Mhm.
So why don't you kind of take us through who you're thinking on, what potential fits do you see out of those three? And just kind of overall thoughts on any potential free agent additions at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, it sounds like unfortunate I don't know, it sounds like we're probably done in that market, but who
Yeah,
knows, right? So Hollywood Brown, like, I think he's a good enough talent, like, he's a pretty good player. If you look at some of his stats, thought I always felt like he performed better than what you actually go and look at his stats are.
agreed.
Um, he has been a little bit banged up the past 2 years. To me, right, he's 5'9", right? So he's an inch taller than Pop, a couple inches shorter than Kendrick Bourne, but he feels kind of redundant with those 2 already. Now, he's better. He's a good player, like, I'm not putting him down, but it feels a little redundant. Um, I would rather right, like, having Pop in the slot or, right, Bourne out wide, like, it really comes down to the money, and I assumed that he would be getting a big contract, but just a quick look, like, PFF has him projected at, like, 1 year, 12 million, or, like, 2 years, 20 million, something like that, which, like, in that case, sure. But
Yeah.
a lot of these guys, like, it's such a cop out, but, like, it kinda depends on the money, but for Hollywood Brown, I think he's a decent enough name and he is a good player. So I think it just depends on, like, maybe we might, because he has a bad market, maybe we can get him cheap for 1 or 2 years, and that I'd be down with that. I think that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, look, I think I'm in the same position as you are, right? I think he's probably somebody that I probably would have expected to have a little bit more juice up until this point in free agency.
Yeah.
I know he's battled injuries. I know he necessarily you kind of talked about it at the beginning there, but he feels like he's been better than some of his numbers show.
Yep.
And it feels like he's got a little bit more juice than maybe some of those numbers show. And look, maybe some of that's playing with Lamar his first couple years not being on the same page. And then when you think
Mhm.
about, I mean, look, those first couple games before Kyler tore his ACL and
Yeah.
Brown kind of got banged up a bit, like he was like wide receiver 5 or 6 through the first
Mhm.
month and change of the fantasy season. So like the dude has juice, and I think at that price tag, that's something I'd be more than willing to stomach. Especially when you think about, okay, like how does that wide receiver room start to shape up? Now we've got somebody like Hollywood Brown, we've got Pop, we've got Kendrick Bourne, and then whoever we add kind of via the draft, right? Hopefully
Yep.
that's Troy Franklin. That conversation is for another day. Um, but um, but yeah, I think look at that price with some of the money that you've got to spend, he's definitely a guy that I would be intrigued in.
Yeah,
Um,
it's somewhere in the 12 to 14 range, maybe max like a 15 AAV. Like it starts to push a little bit, but for someone that cheap, I would be okay with. I think it'd be working out. He's one of those guys. Like it stinks. Like it is. I guess it's the path of the NFL of getting smaller wide receivers. But right now, Bourne 6'1". I get Taekwon's tall, but who knows about Taekwon? But like
I know,
he's not. Bourne isn't super big. Pop obviously is not big. So it's like, are we surrounding our quarterback with
just
not
the lack of
exactly
size.
the
Yeah.
tallest
Mhm.
guys, which I guess leads to like Mike Williams. Right, because he's a big body, big play wide receiver. He's a playmaker. He'd be a ton of fun. He also like I for some reason I thought he missed way more games than he actually has, but I think he's more of a guy that like he gets banged up in like the second quarter and then like doesn't finish, but then he comes back the next week. So
Yeah.
like he has a lot of games started and played, but like not full games. My issue is like I think he is someone that if he were to come here, we'd have to give him a lot of guaranteed money.
Yeah.
And he's older and he does get banged up. I It's kind of like the Calvin Ridley thing. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving him a ton of guaranteed money. If it was low guaranteed, super high incentive, it'd be amazing. But I think if you take a contract like that, that would be a contract with the Chiefs or like one of these other teams that he can see those incentives truly being reached. Whereas here, it's a much harder sell because it's like you're getting Brissett at best or like for half the year and then like a rookie. I think it'd be a very difficult sell if unless we like really overextended on like guaranteed money.
I think it's a fantastic point, Dan. I really do, because when you think about somebody like his position, right? He's a guy that's really he's 29 years old, going on 30. He's
Yep.
probably really looking at like one more decent payday, right? And now
Yeah.
he's deciding on how that kind of comes. What is it? Is it a 1 year prove it deal somewhere that is incentive laden, like somewhere like Kansas City, where he has a chance to actually achieve those incentives,
Yeah.
right? Or is it something that like a lesser team like ourselves, do we pony up and give more that kind of guaranteed money up front? I think it's a really good way to kind of phrase the possibility of Mike Williams coming in here. So kudos to you there. I think one of the things that I'd be interested in is, you kind of mentioned it. He would bring an element of size, much
Yeah.
needed size,
Yeah.
to this room. And look, let's be honest. I think when he makes some plays at his size, like the fluidity that he does have, it's
Mhm.
super intriguing, man. Like it's fucking
Yeah.
awesome watching Mike Williams make sideline catches. Like it really
Yeah.
is. The problem is he does get banged up, and
Mhm.
whether it's an ankle, whether it's a back, or he'll be super super limited, so the games played will be there, but he's just really not making an impact on the field. And look, coming off the ACL, I don't know how comfortable I'd be like giving him a lot of guaranteed money, just because it's not like he's got this great track record. Whereas like,
Yeah.
if you look at his teammate, right? I think this is a perfect example. Is like Keenan
Yeah.
somehow, to some people, still has this fucking rap that he's like this injury prone guy.
It's
And like,
wild.
look, it's nuts, dude. It's fucking crazy. And like, look, I get it. He's coming off a year where he missed, the last 4 or 5 games, and in the end, they probably just shut him down
Yeah,
because
they sat
they were
him.
just
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And I know he had missed some time the beginning of last year, right? Those kind of
Mhm.
first 6, 7 games. But dude, go back and look at his fucking game logs. He plays like
Yeah.
5 years of 16 games in a row. So like
Yeah.
that's stuff that like Mike Williams is doing. But I guarantee if you looked at his snap shares,
Yes.
it's not what Keenan is, right? And
Mhm.
That's what I'd be worried about from production standpoint is like availability is like a fucking thing, and it's
Yeah.
like what good is this gonna get? What good is he gonna do for us for a rookie quarterback if we end up bringing one in? If he's gonna be banged up more often than not. So look, I think the thing that probably makes the most sense for Mike and kind of I hate to say it, but for the Chiefs is like bringing somebody like him in. Like
Yeah.
imagine if they brought him in and he stays fucking healthy and he's their MVS replacement. Like get the fuck out of
He's
here,
way
dude.
better than
And he's
MVS.
way fucking better. Like that's just gonna be wicked annoying, and I can like almost already see it. But
Yeah, me too,
um,
unfortunately.
all right. So
But
last guy, I oh go ahead. Do you have
oh,
something?
I was on the same page as you guys. Last guy is Tyler Boyd, who for me is probably the 3rd best wide receiver that's still out there for as a free agent. Um,
Yep.
honestly, I think I have like this random attachment. I think I probably had him in fantasy in like 2019 when he went 90 for 1,000. So like I've loved him forever now. Um, but he will turn 30 in November. He is 6'2", so he's a little bit on the bigger side, but he really is a big slot. He had a 76.7 slot snap share last year, which again is like, then do we bring him in to then take Pop's role? Eh, I'd rather not.
Yeah.
So like then can we really successfully move him out to like the X or the Z probably and like move him out that way? Like I guess it depends on the fit. I don't think he's going to cost a ton of money. So he is a good player. I think we've seen him in Cincinnati enough to know that he is a good wide receiver. So I think it just depends on like where they would view him scheme wise because I don't think he would cost a lot.
No, I think scheme wise is a really good way to put it. I'll be honest. From like a straight up football player perspective, like I fucking love Tyler Boyd.
Yeah.
I think Tyler Boyd is like a super solid fucking football player. I think he did a ton of good things for Cincinnati. Like when you saw T went down, I'm
Mhm.
not saying he stepped in and was like a T or Jamar whenever one of them got hurt, but like that dude can step in. He's a fucking professional wide receiver.
Yep.
Like he is, and you can see it, right? Like he's gone for 1,000 yards in an offense before.
Yep.
Um, Granted, Joe Burrow was at the helm, but like we've seen him be able to do it. And look, I think I agree with you. It does. I do wish that somebody with his size like had the ability to, and maybe he does. We just haven't seen it enough yet. But
Mhm.
really doesn't seem like a guy that you can shift outside too much. And look, I think where we are right now, I think most of us, and I'm in agreement with you here. Like I'd love to see Pop in that slot role as opposed to like
Yep.
kicking him out and putting Tyler Boyd in. Now, if we were closer, right? If we were
Mhm.
closer to, potentially if Tyler Boyd comes in and he can really make a difference for us and take us kind of the next level,
Yep.
different conversation. I just don't think we're fucking there, right?
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I like him. I think honestly, if I was a contending team, I'm trying to
Yes.
think right now. I mean, I know Curtis Samuel went to the Bills today. I think
Mhm.
that was like 3 years, 33, which is kind of a sneaky signing.
Yeah.
I read something earlier that there's a Joe there's a Joe Brady and Curtis Samuel connection from Carolina,
Mhm.
which is something that I did not kind of put two and two together when I first saw the signing there. So I thought that was interesting.
Mhm.
But I'm trying to think like where else. I'll tell you what, the Jets could probably use a big slot guy. I don't know if they have the
Yeah,
money,
but
but
I mean,
like,
their quarterback is actually gonna be running for vice president, so I guess,
that's
does it
true.
really
I forgot
matter?
about that. Yeah, I forgot about that.
It would be the most Jets story ever that they finally get Aaron Rodgers and he bangs an Achilles, and then the next year he's like, "Hey, I'm actually taking the year off to run with RFK
It
Jr."
it would be like the most insane storyline ever, and something that could only happen to the Jets.
Oh, yep. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It'd be so funny. I'm rooting for it. I really am.
I kind of am too. Even though I have I have significant Garrett Wilson shares from a dynasty perspective, I
Yep.
still kind of am rooting for that a little bit. Um, all right, let's close it out here quickly with the offense. Chikwema Okorafor. I
Yeah,
think I go ahead.
big fan. Big fan from like what I've read about him. I
Yeah.
obviously don't know him, but 1 year, $4 million, and the 8 million max is actually pretty attainable in regards to incentives, playing time, and doing stuff like that. And like for the most part, if he hits that max, it's because he's playing. Now, hopefully, he's playing because he's good and not injuries. But I, it's not an overreaction. It's at worst, sounds like a pretty good depth play, and maybe that is where Onwenu sticks to the right guard, and then Okafor becomes the right tackle, and all of a sudden we have the a crazy cheap starting caliber right
Yeah.
tackle. I think it's
Yeah.
good. Like I said, worst case, it's again a very cheap, necessary depth piece.
Yeah.
But it got a good, I think over the cap, it was just like, yeah, this is a really good signing for really cheap money. And watching him play a little bit on like some just like clips, I'm like, yeah, he seems like, he might be able to do some things. So,
It- Look, I think for the price point, man, I think I'm with you. He started games for the Steelers, and you're not breaking the bank for a guy like that. It's a guy that I feel like, do I necessarily want him starting? Probably not. But if somebody goes down, or if we have some shuffling to do, he's the
mhm,
guy that I probably feel a lot more comfortable about, that knowing that he has started games and at his price point, kind of
yep,
throwing in there, right? So I do, from a
yep,
depth perspective, I think it's some much needed depth that they needed, and at a really nice price point as well.
yeah, agreed. And then
All
because
right.
from
Oh yeah,
there,
go ahead.
I would
Yeah,
say
go
just
ahead.
from there, the rest of the offensive line free agents, like you're looking at Tyron Smith, who is great when he plays, but the last few years, like this year, he played 13 games, but the 2022 he only played 4. In
Yep.
2021, he played 11. In 2020, he only played 2. So he's a great player and like very good left tackle. But like if we were to get him, everyone has to understand like he's missing like 3 to 4 games, like guaranteed. And then what
Yeah.
Trent Brown, I think everyone's all set with that. So there
What
isn't a
about
lot left.
I don't know if he's actually signed anywhere at this point, but where are you at on, like, and I know his Jets tenure was like very, very up and down, but
Yep,
Mekhi
that too.
Becton.
If we can like, honestly, he'd be like a one-year prove it type deal,
Yeah.
maybe like 2. I know they don't have, like, team options the same way as, like, baseball, but, like, again, 2 that, like, allows us that we can get out pretty easily if after 1 year it's, like, such a disaster because he is a very large athletic human being, but yeah, I feel like selling Patriots fans on that when we've seen him play, quote, unquote, the last
Yeah.
several games has been, it's like, "Oh, good, we got Mekhi Becton matchup against Judon, this'll be fun." So,
Exactly.
breaking that from us, but I have seen people kind of talk about it because he is still young, and, like, if he figures out his health, like, maybe we can get him in. He'd be someone, like, if Scarnecchia was still here, that'd be like, "Yeah,
See,
sure, whatever."
it's literally perfect that you said that, because this seems like the type of guy that if we
Yes.
had true stability, and
Mhm.
look, this is not a knock to like Adrian Clem or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
just when you're talking about Scar, you're talking about like one of the fucking
Yep.
Hall of Fame offensive line coaches. But I think you're right. That would have been a perfect example for us to bring in a guy like this.
It'd be like getting the
Um,
young Trent Brown when he came here and, like,
yes,
figured it out,
yeah,
and
for
then
sure,
Scar
man.
left, and Brown's like, "Yeah, never mind, I don't wanna play football anymore."
Totally agree. Totally agree. Um, Anything else you want to hit from an offensive side of the ball?
No, I think, the only other thing that I think they even did was, like, they brought back Jalen Reagor for $0, so
Yeah,
sure. And again, he's gonna be a kick returner. The only thing I do like about it is with the new kick return rules, we should see a lot more returns just based off it has to land in that kicking zone or else it's like we get the ball at the 35.
I was gonna say,
So
do you want to give the people a quick reminder of like what those new kicking rules are,
yeah, if
if
I
you've got them off
remember
the top of
correctly,
your
if
head?
it lands, if they just kick it into the end zone, the receiving team gets the ball at the 35 automatically, which is insane. But
Yeah.
if you kick it into like the kick zone is like between the 20 and the goal line, and if it
Yep.
rolls in, then it goes to the 20. But a lot of teams are probably going to just kick it short and force teams to actually return the ball.
Actually
So
return it. Yeah.
I mean, he only kicked 7. He only had 7 returns for us. Um, the 98-yard return against the Bills does a lot of work for his average, to be honest. He had a 31-yard return average, but if you take away the 98-yarder, he 6 receptions for 123 yards, which is a 20 and a half average, which is a little bit below average.
Okay.
But he has speed, and
Yeah.
he showed it last year. He has the ability to take one to the house. So I think if special teams improved, which talked about on that first episode,
Sure.
nothing guaranteed there. Um, I'm sure he'd bounce up to like a league average type guy, maybe a little bit better with the speed to house it. So For $1 million, sure. I think
Yeah,
he's fine. I don't know, might catch 5 to 10 passes. Like, that's not gonna be his role. And
exactly.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I know we kind of talked about it earlier, and I know he's got a case of the fumbles a little bit, but it would be interesting to see if they put Gibson back there at all. Because I
Yeah,
know he did return some kicks in Washington, but it was also kind of, you know, he fumbled a few back there too. So we'll have
yeah,
to see. The last guy that I just kind of wanted to talk about, he was on my wish list a little bit, and I know we kind of talked tight end, but I've always been intrigued by a guy like Noah Fant. Athletic Iowa tight end, would have been kind of fun to see him come here. I'm surprised he actually ended up going back to Seattle for 2 years, 21 million.
yeah.
Um, but it would have been someone I would have not hated to pair with Hunter Henry. But
Yeah. Yeah, getting another guy that can make some plays and catch some passes would have been nice. But I guess you probably look at it, and this is where, right, probably knowing more about the Alex Van Pelt offense, I feel like it's probably just like a one tight end type system. So
yep.
having someone like Fant would be fun, but probably not the best allocation of money.
It's fair point. It's a fair point. And why don't we close up the offensive kind of side of the ball with talking a little bit about who's going to be running, at least as of now, who's going to be running that AVP offense, and that is Jacoby Brissett.
Yes. So
So, I'll go ahead.
I loved it. And I feel like
Ye-
this was like the biggest, like, obvious, like, duh, this is going to happen for like weeks leading up to it. Like, they're going to get Jacoby. And I'm
Yep.
so happy they did. Um, I love Jacoby Brissett so much. Ever since he like took over that game when he couldn't physically like throw the ball, but he still battled his ass off. I've always just been a massive fan. He is. I think he's better than people give him credit for. He's obviously not perfect by any means, but he is a very strong game manager. And speaking of that AVP connection, right, which is huge, right? Getting a quarterback in, right? He, like you talked about, like being an adult in the room. He is a veteran that locker rooms across the league, everywhere he's been absolutely loved. And then he also knows the offense, which I also think is huge. But this was tweeted, this is from Zachary Kruger, ZK underscore FFB on Twitter. He's a good follow. Here's a little shout out. But in 11 games with Jacoby, while Sean Watson was out, Jacoby went for 2,600 yards, 12 TDs, 64% completion rate. If you pace that out, 4,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But he was ranked 11th in EPA and tied for 12th in QB success rate. And they averaged 23.5 points per game. If you could just get that 23.5 points per game with our defense,
Yeah.
that's where that's the thing where I don't think we're as far off, is because we have such an elite defense. And I guess, sure, the loss of Belichick, like, who knows what that's really going to do.
Sure.
But
Sure.
if we can just get the 23 to 24 points a game, we're going to be in a ton of games.
I
So,
I totally agree. And I think we kind of talked about it briefly before we kind of started here. Even if we go that kind of young rookie quarterback to start,
mhm,
Brissett feels like the perfect guy for somebody to come in, learn under, and be a nice bridge, whether it's, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. Maybe it's the first year, right? Like maybe it is the first year. Maybe we actually sit somebody because look, we've seen some success of these guys that do sit for quite a while.
yep,
The last two that come to mind that really have sat for a year are Patrick Mahomes and Jordan Love, right? Like
yep,
they are the ones that sat for the kind of that true year. And it used to be a lot more of the norm. So
yeah,
look, the fact that I don't think throwing a rookie in there right away is going to make a difference. I wouldn't hate seeing somebody come in, learn
mhm,
under a veteran like Brissett, who's kind of been there, seen it. So I'm with you, man. I think at the price point and, really having an adult in the room is nice. Like he's a professional fucking quarterback.
yep,
Whereas like last year, like we're not, it's not like we have to expect tantrums or anything like that, right? Like,
yeah,
like this is a guy that is a fucking professional. And I think
yep,
his teammates look at him that way. And I think that like that's just going to be nice to see from the quarterback position itself.
mhm. Yeah, no, right there with
Um,
you. I love the signing.
hey, so a little bit of breaking news here. So Marquise Brown just signed a 1 year deal with the Chiefs. Um, so we can go ahead and take
Oh
him
boy.
off any potential Pats kind of fill there. And the other one is the Chargers just traded Keenan Allen to the Bears for a 4th round pick.
for a fourth round.
for a fourth round pick. Yeah.
All right,
So
so
those, yeah.
Hollywood. What? By the way, Marquise Brown, Hollywood, 1 year,
Yes.
11 million. So there's that 12 million.
Yep.
Shit.
Right there.
Uh,
Fucking Chiefs.
the wow, Keenan for a fourth is interesting. I love Keenan Allen so much, like we just talked about. He
Yeah.
is older, but for a fourth rounder, I would have done that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, Keenan Allen has had my heart for a little while. I just like you want to talk about like a fucking professional wide receiver that can get open and that you can look. I know he's getting older and up there in age, but like that dude to start last year to see what he did, like having him and DJ Moore, whatever they kind of do at quarterback, we'll end up seeing. I think we kind of know that. Look, they're probably going to be taking
Caleb.
Caleb Williams here. Like, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then look, they've got that ninth pick too. So there's a scenario here where like they could fucking, I mean, they could take Rome at 9, and now you're giving Caleb Williams,
Yeah.
fucking DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. Like
Plus
you're giving
DeAndre
him
Swift,
plus DeAndre Swift, like
Gerald
Cole Kmet
Everett.
is Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet, like though that is a real fucking offense with weapons, man.
Yeah.
So like it does seem like they're setting that young quarterback that they're going to be taking at 1. Certainly seems like Caleb to every chance to succeed there. So that's a really interesting move by the Chicago Bears.
And by the way, right, that was a multiple year what they built out with
Yeah,
Chicago wasn't all done just like it. That's been two years plus in the making. Right.
exactly.
So again, Patriots fans, like understand, like as much as I do think we're closer than we might want to, we think it's okay that this is going to take 2 years to really build out. By the third
I
year, then
mean,
it takes off.
look at the Lions, dude. Like before
Yeah.
last year, like people started to like they became darlings again because they were rising up and they were frisky. They had some fun young guys. If we can get some fun young offensive guys or guys on the offensive side of the ball in this draft, I really would like our kind of outlook going forward, right? And we can talk
Mhm.
about that as we get into draft season. But yeah, just wanted to kind of bring that up because those are two good size fucking free agency moves from the wide receiver position.
I would have loved either one of those deals for the Patriots. 1 year,
Yeah, me
11
too.
million,
Fourth
fourth
round pick for
rounder.
fucking Keenan Allen, man. Oh man.
God damn it.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we jump to the defensive side of the ball here? I think the one that stands out, Dan, is Uche. I think
Yep.
at least just on the surface, right? Like if we take, yes, they placed the transition tag on Duggar. We kind
Mhm.
of know that, but I think Uche coming back at 1 year was it 3 million, Dan?
Yeah, so this is really the guy I wanted to talk about because I know we could get to Anthony Jennings, but I feel like that's pretty like cool, fine, whatever. Uche is the last guy for me that like means something.
Yeah.
And the Tom Pelissaro tweet is just the coolest thing in the world, right? He had several offers, including one worth up to $15 million over 2 years, 11 million guaranteed, but he stayed here for 1 million 3, and he could make up to 8. To me, this signals a very clear thing that he has very real trust and love for the Gerard Mayo Covington like outlook.
Yeah.
And again, it just shows you like when the locker room, like when Gerard Mayo got announced and all the players are like, let's fucking go. Like I will run through a brick wall for Gerard. And like the fact that he's willing to take, you don't see this anymore.
No, you
Like
don't.
you sometimes will get like a maybe $1 million, $2 million type hometown discount. This is a massive, like several millions of dollars. He's like, no, I want to stay here for one more year. It seems like they talked to him like this, and you are going to get this many sacks. This is how we're going to use you. You're not going to be just slotted in for these only like very specific roles.
Yeah.
I'm super excited, and the fact that he was willing to do that also tells me about him. But then again, the outlook for this team, I think it speaks volumes.
I think it's a look. We kind of talked about it a little bit as far as I think you brought it up with Onwenu, like rewarding some of kind of that homegrown talent.
Yep.
I think this speaks to it's a fantastic point by you is that it really does speak to the trust that some of these guys have in a guy like DeMarcus Covington and in a guy like obviously the head coach Gerard Mayo. But this hearing something like this, because you're right, guys don't fucking do this anymore,
Yeah.
especially young edge guys that
Yeah.
Like, look, if they have an opportunity to go get money somewhere, more often than not, they're going to get that fucking money. And more often than not, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But I think seeing what Uche has done here and kind of that, like you spoke about, that limited role, clearly there's been conversations like, look, we're going to put you in the best position to succeed.
Yep.
And the fact that he trusts DeMarcus and Gerard enough, man, like
Yep.
if other players start to see that around the league and take notice, and more of the locker room continues to buy in, like
Mhm.
kind of Uche has in this situation here, that has got to get Patriot. And that's something
Mhm.
that probably goes overlooked on the surface on a deal like this, right?
Yep.
Like, I think when the public sees this or some Patriots fan sees this, it's like, okay, sweet, we got Uche back at 3 million. But
Yep.
that context that you provided for him coming back that way, him turning down offers elsewhere, that should what get Patriot, like that's what should get Patriots fans more excited than anything else,
Yeah.
right? Is that our ability to keep a guy like that cheaper than where he could have gone elsewhere, right? I think that's maybe we're starting to see that little bit of culture shift to guys want to fucking be here now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's huge.
So
So this was I loved it, and, like, once I saw that tweet of, like, he could have taken so much more money, but he wanted to be here, that it fired me up because
yeah,
it signaled that there's something that the players are buying in when, again, we're the 3rd overall pick. It didn't go well last year. And with all of even with all those changes, Uche is like, "No, I see the role and I see the vision." Very, very excited to hopefully he goes out and crushes, and I guess, then we have to pay him next year, but cool.
look, let's cross that bridge. And it kind of goes with that theme, right? That we've been talking about. It's not only did we bring back a guy that I think most Patriots fans are excited about to see what he can do, like more increased snap share, everything like that. You're also just like from a financial and like flexible and structurability perspective, like that's a guy that fits with what you're trying to do, right? You're not
Mhm.
overcommitting down the line. He's a perfect deal for right now.
Yep,
And he's the guy that's going to give you everything he fucking has right now to go and get that next contract. So
yep,
perfect guy to kind of slot into everything that they've done this year from a free agency perspective.
yep.
Um, any guys you want to hit from like a wish list perspective or anything like that from defensive side of the ball?
At this point, I think it'll really start to slow down a little bit more.
Yeah.
Defensively, I know we were talking a little bit. I don't have any specific names. Like, there's so many stud safeties that are available. Like, it'd be so fun to get some of these high named guys. I don't expect us to, just because Duggar and Jabril Peppers is the clear starters, and it's probably smarter to spend money on elsewhere. But some of those free agents would be fun. Julian Blackman. I think Justin Simmons is just out of the picture, even though, again, it would be fun just to create an insane defense.
Sure.
Jordan Fuller, right? Adoree Jackson at corner. Like, there's definitely some guys that we can bring in for like some solid depth pieces. Um, but I'm also not going to pretend that like I know the ins and outs of Adoree Jackson and like is he
Yeah.
truly worth it or not. But um, I, it's I'm so focused on the offensive side of the ball because that's where we need the most help.
Yeah, agreed. No, I mean, I think it's a fair way to look at it. I think one of the guys that I probably would have looked at before he went to the Lions today is a guy like DJ Reader, just kind of
Yes.
on that front line.
Yep.
Like I would have really liked somebody like him because he's a guy that doesn't break the bank, and by all
Mhm.
accounts, like wherever he goes, everybody fucking loves him, and he's a solid fucking football player,
Yep.
right? I think the other one is look with obviously it's not like JC made a huge impact or anything like that, but you had the exit of JC,
Mhm.
you had the exit of Adrian Phillips. So, and I know kind of Peppers plays that weird, he comes down, plays linebacker a little bit, like goes back there a little bit. So I would like to see them add
Yeah.
somebody. I think to your point, right? Like Simmons is probably like a wish list guy that would be awesome if it happened.
Mhm.
Probably not super realistic, but yeah, I think Jordan Fuller, Julian Blackman, guys like that. Like if look, I agree with you. I think the offensive side of the ball is where we need more help, certainly than the defensive side of the ball. But look, if you're going to kind of lean into what you're good at, if you don't love what's out there on the offensive side of the ball, those are
Mhm.
a couple of names that, at the end of the day, if they come in, I think we'd probably most Patriots fans would be pretty happy with. But
Yep. Yeah, a couple of guys, but well, I guess we'll see. I guess the hard part is, yeah, it's not the main focus right now.
yeah,
or like a or Jordan Whitehead for cheap. Just these guys that are good, solid players that, again, yeah, don't break the bank.
Yeah,
We have the money
absolutely.
again, but we don't have to spend it willy-nilly on guys that don't deserve it. You want the
Yeah,
right
look,
players, the right
let's
fit.
let's let's not go spend our wad like that's going to affect us a couple years down the line. If
Yep.
you're able to come spend some money for these next year or two and really not financially commit beyond that and
Mhm,
start to position yourself for truly that next, like,
mhm.
you bring your rookie in this year. Okay, now you've got your rookie quarterback on a 4-year deal with a fifth year option.
Yep,
Then you start to think about your window and what that looks like from a financial perspective, right? So I
yep,
think definitely if you're going to go that rookie route, let's not commit and see what we have kind of as this year goes on.
yep. Fully
So,
agree.
all right. Well, Dan, this was great.
Yeah,
Appreciate you talking through some free agent stuff here. Hopefully, you guys kind of got an idea with some of the guys that we've brought in, and some of the guys that potentially are still out there and that we're looking at. And just overall, feel free to comment, give us your thoughts on what you think the Patriots have done so far. We'd love to hear from you guys. And Dan, I think over the course of the next couple of weeks here, we're going to kind of start to get into draft season, right?
yeah, yeah. Very excited to see with like I think you mentioned very early, the betting odds seem to look like Drake May might just be there at pick number 3. So we'll that'll be a fun discussion. Do we want him or Jaden
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
someone else?
Or is there a king's ransom and we end up trading down a little bit? It's
Yep,
honestly, from a misinformation standpoint in the NFL, it should be a very, very interesting 5 weeks here. So,
yep. Can't wait.
um, yeah, guys, look for the draft kind of content to kind of get ramped up here. As far as we'll take a look at some positional groups for the Patriots and really try to highlight some guys that we think would
Mhm.
potentially be good fits. And just looking forward to talking through some draft stuff. So, Dan, appreciate it, and guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.
Peace.